we're having a national emergency. The Goyim finally know it's all over for the Jews, I guess, and Israel, of course.
I detect a bit of sarcasm in that comment you just made. But do you think, taking this seriously, do you think that there is something to be said for having the public having too much information in a way? You know, like we like to believe that the truth shall set you free and government should be transparent and so on. But a couple of things, maybe you don't want to know how the sausage is made when it comes to the government and when it comes to foreign dealings and war and all that kind of stuff. But also just dumping all of this information is disinformation sort of in itself, because it invites people to go down all sorts of rabbit holes. There's no sense of this is an allegation, this is a weird joke, this was something that's not really been verified. If you dumped my email correspondence just on the web and allowed people to play with it, they would come up with all sorts of bizarre conspiracy theories. So there is something deeply problematic about this notion, whether it regards the JFK files or the MLK files or Epstein, of just putting this data out there. It might very well have some terrible effects for the public's sanity. And it's just actually not the way to do it. Like, there's something to be said for an older style form of, you have these big archives and historians can look through them and maybe discover a narrative or document it. But just allowing this free for all with the public is sort of in itself a form of disinformation. That's one thing that's crossed my mind.
I mean, I was told by many people that they were saying, hey, you should listen to Nick Fuentes. He has the same opinions as you. And so I listened to him. And he said several times, I think the public have an absolute right to know, and it's like, no, they don't. And he's crusading against liberalism. That's the most liberal idea. I mean, and it's kind of, we talk about the paradox of tolerance, right? If you tolerate Nazis and Islamists, then liberals will collapse, right? But there's also kind of a paradox of tolerance in terms of information, like how much freedom of information, freedom of speech can you really have before, this thing kind of implodes? I mean, I can't think of anything more threatening to liberalism. And, I debated Isaac Simpson, and he keeps posting all this stuff about how Epstein proves that our elites have gone too far. We used to have virtuous elites. Now we have terrible ones. It's like, if you go, the only reason you're saying that, and he's supposedly Jewish, but I consider him a Goyim for all intents and purposes. He's this type of person who has no interest in history, has no interest in JFK or FDR, all the things those people got up to. Like, they were allied with the mafia, and the mafia was killing people. And there was sex trafficking of Marilyn Monroe and threesomes and crazy, salacious things. They were all cheating on their wives, et cetera, from a wheelchair, nonetheless. And he has no interest in that because it's not in the news cycle. This is sports for these people. They don't care about the truth. They don't care about historical context. I say, well, Henry VIII was, a bad dude, and he did all these terrible things, but he was a great king, and he brought England to the stage of world empire. And, they either don't engage with that, or they say, well, actually, he was a Satanist, or he was bad. England should be Catholic, or so, there's no context. There's no historical context. Jeffrey Epstein, taken in view of history, he was not a violent man. Like, I disagree with a lot of his politics, and we'll get into that. But, he was not a violent man. He was not raping people. He was not tying them to radiators. He was not engaging in these scatological fantasies. And the most disgusting thing about it is you're seeing this is what these people are obsessed with. When you look at these TikToks of women, reading through their Minotaur porn or whatever it is, it's like, this is what these people are obsessed with. And I'll just say this to kind of cap it off. 99% of people apparently have no clue what schizophrenia is, because schizophrenics are interested in three things: power, sex, and violence. That's consistent. And you can look toward historical sources. Ancient Greeks, they had schizophrenics who would look at the intestines of animals and try to divine the future from that. So we have thousands of years of historical records about what is schizophrenia. It's a historically documented psychosis or mental illness. And modern schizophrenics, if you talk to any of them, their three obsessions are power, sex, and violence. And so whenever something comes into the news, they start getting these recovered memories. Oh, now I recall, this thing that happened to me 20 years ago when I was a kid. And, they were cutting up babies and they were eating them and they were whatever. That's classic schizophrenia. And so if you hear those types of claims being made with zero evidence, yes, there are serial killers. And actually, there's probably some kind of crossover between the fetishes of serial killers and these fetishes of the schizophrenic. But yeah, you can't just, like, if you have any contact with schizophrenics at all, if you spend, an hour talking to a schizophrenic, you'll be like, oh, okay, they're all interested in these three things. If you have an anonymous tip line at the FBI, yeah, you're going to have thousands of schizophrenics calling in and saying, oh, I saw something in the news and it triggered a recovered memory. And, so
I would
crazy.
I am strongly opposed to the concept of recovered memories, because I think it's actually the exact opposite of how the brain works. Things that are traumatic are deeply embedded in your mind, and they're sort of omnipresent with you. The notion that it's sort of lost and 30 years later it reemerges, I think goes against some basic psychology particularly of trauma. But yeah, there's that. There are a lot of accusations that were given to the FBI that people are taking as fact. I mean, I think this came from a few months ago of Donald Trump. Would it beheaded a woman and then threw her body into Lake Superior? I might be getting a few details wrong, but it's just totally outrageous. And again, it's being treated like that actually happened. And you see even liberals they're sort of discovering Pizzagate. They're discovering, again, unverified accusations from sources that are incredible and unreliable, taking that as fact. And it's almost like there's this weird sort of flip going on where whichever side, red or blue, is out of power, they become schizophrenic. And
Or
they think the other
they are
side
made
wants
to
to kill them.
become, they're
Yeah.
incentivized to become schizophrenic. One of the things that I think we're starting to see emerge with these 3 million files is that Jeffrey Epstein has been cannibalized by his own side, in a sense. Now, he was a multifaceted man. He had many sides to him. But one of the things that emerges is he wanted the ruble to be the world reserve currency. He was totally aligned with Bannon and Chomsky and Peter Thiel. And so, who is pushing all the Pizzagate nonsense? And in fact, I just asked Jeff Giza. He didn't really have any information for me, but I just said, there was a meeting with MAGA 3X, Peter Thiel, Epstein, and, this person on Twitter is claiming it was to promote Pizzagate in the run up to the 2016 election. Do you know anything about that? Do you think that this was just an organic 4chan phenomenon, social contagion, or do you think this was directed from the top down? And he was like, I don't really have a lot of information for you on that. But I think that
Jeff Giza is a curious figure. If you've ever met him, he's gay, and that's fine. I mean, that's he's open about it. It's his own thing. He is friends apparently with Peter Thiel. He was working with Peter Thiel on a book called The Diversity Myth that Peter Thiel published while at Stanford, and according to Jeff, that he was working on it with him. He also has this Mormon background, and if you've ever met him, he does seem extremely benign, and I mean this as a compliment. I'm not suggesting anything. I mean, he just has that somewhat goofy, if we're honest, sort of nice guy quality to him. Yet he is 1 degree of separation or no degrees of separation from a lot of the nonsense that he criticizes on his Substack. And so I don't know quite what to say. I really don't want to throw him under the bus because I genuinely like him as a person, and he is upfront and rational. There's no question about that. But yeah, he was very deep with Mike Cernovich back in the day in 2016 and 2017. How do I know this? Because when I was punched on camera in a situation that's just totally embarrassing at this point. I mean, I'm wearing like a Pepe the Frog pin and I'm talking about memes. I mean, I want to punch myself at this point. But anyway, I was punched, but I was assaulted by Antifa on camera. I mean, it was, I was the victim in this case. But
you
anyway,
and Will Stancil now are part of the same club.
Exactly. We're part of the same club, Antus. But and a lot of the things people do say about Antifa, like it is absolutely true. Like they are wild, chaotic, and violent, not to mention smelly. And if you aren't into tearing down the system, they're just gonna kill you or something. Like it doesn't matter if you agree with them that ICE is out of control. Like they want to kill liberals as well. Anyway, where was I going? Oh, so after that happened, I actually retreated to Jeff Giza's apartment where Mike Cernovich was there, and they were working together. There's also the Chuck Johnson was working with Jeff Giza, doing sort of things like bringing Bill Clinton's supposed sexual assault victims to a debate between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, and promoting Barack Obama's long lost brother from Africa, Malik. I mean, he's sort of had his hand in these things. He wrote an article about mimetic warfare for a journal of NATO. Now, you could sort of explain away all of these things as he's a rich guy, successful, friends with all these people, a bit of a dilettante. That's sort of a reasonable assessment of the situation. But again, I just come back to that point that he seems to be very close, and he seems to like all of these things that he now criticizes. Now, maybe he has had a change of heart, but so much of the promotion of what we called the alt-right in 2016 and 2017, which was, it's not the alt-right, it's not Richard Spencer, it's not Jared Taylor or whatever, it's not racist, it's not racist, nor anti-Semitic. And it's just fun, real people from the hinterlands. They're just cool. The irony of the promotion of the alt-right and people like Cernovich and company, Bill Mitchell, etc., is that they became so much more insane and arguably so much more damaging than the alt-right ever was. Because the alt-right back in the day was somewhat secular. We talked about race and immigration and Trump, and we got into the memes or whatever. The alt-right is the site of mimetic warfare, much more so than the alt-right, simply because they were bigger and more connected and maybe didn't have that scarlet R of racism attached to them. And so in terms of promoting Pizzagate, which led to QAnon conspiracies, the deep state are eating babies and drinking their blood. It's a horrible version of the Eucharist involving cannibalism. All of this is coming from the kind of mainstream, the alt-right, the sort of pro-Trump, but we're not evil, bro type people. And I do find that fascinating, and I find that a kind of fascinating irony, which is that the racist, if secular alt-right was deplatformed and as a movement destroyed. I mean, I'm still around, etc., but as a movement was definitely put in its place. But then that opened up space for something that is arguably far worse and far more damaging to the sanity of average Americans, far more conspiratorial, far more schizophrenic, if you want to say that. And I mean, I'm just going to be honest here. Jeff Bezos sort of around all that stuff. And anyway, this is not a show about him, but there's no doubt that the Epstein files are going to eclipse the Podesta files, anything leaked by WikiLeaks over the past 10 years as a source of misinformation and stupidity.
One of the mantras that I keep hearing repeated is the Epstein files prove everything that anti Semitic conspiracy theorists have been saying for the last 10 years. And so my question is, oh, okay, so were anti Semitic conspiracy theorists saying that there was a global cabal of elites who were trying to make the ruble the global currency? That's what they were saying. They were saying that Putin is best friends with Jeffrey Epstein. That's what they were saying. They were saying that like his if you look at the countries that he was actually like working with and helping, it's like Russia, Hungary, Viktor Orban. That's what Alex Jones was saying. That's what Candace Owens is saying. So there, I've noticed this thing, especially with Jack Posobiec and Cernovich, is that this is their green light moment. This is the moment where they've been kind of holding back. They've known about it. I mean, you know, Posobiec had his 1488, you know, moments or on Twitter. But they've been keeping their powder dry for the last 10 years. You know, it's not the right time for anti-Semitism. Now that the Epstein files drop, all of a sudden it's okay to talk about how, the Jews hate us and they call us Goyim. Why is that? Why is anti-Semitism in this moment finally breaking out? You could say, well, it's been a gradual progression. First you had, you know, Tucker did it, Candace Owens said, you know, you have a timeline. But why this moment in particular do those individuals choose to do this? And I think it comes down to Russia, because we haven't gained any new information about really Israel in this, or Jews very much. There's no new Jews use the word goy, they make Jewish jokes, whatever. The revelation
sort of knew that.
Everybody knew that. So it's like the revelation. It's like Cernovich and Posobiec we're not dumb about that. What has come out is the Russia information, and their primary concern is running cover for that faction.